on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Hi everybody, it's me, the Fedge, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I am your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin. And today we interview experiencer Sherry Wilde. Sherry was living an idyllic life as a wife, mother, and business owner until 1987, when her community experienced a UFO flap that was considered one of the most active in the world. No one could have ever guessed the unbelievable turn of events that would occur over the next 18 to 24 months, as Sherry was forced to accept her involvement in a phenomenon that was totally unknown to her. Faced with the indisputable evidence that she was experiencing contact with extraterrestrial beings was astonishing to this pragmatic and level-headed woman of 37. But to learn her contact had been ongoing for her entire life almost pushed her over the edge. Sherry spent the next several years of her life trying to exonerate the experiences from her mind and did her best to return to a normal life. But when heavy contact started again in late 2009, after several years of relative peace, she could no longer ignore it. Inexplicably, she found herself writing a book about the encounters as her memory opened up to the past events and the teachings these beings had imparted to her. Overcoming her fear and learning the truth of her involvement with these ultra-dimensional beings became her life goal. She now accepts the truth of these encounters and has cooperative contact on a regular basis with the beings she affectionately refers to as her guides. Sherry has had an overwhelming amount of physical contact with beings from an alternate reality and has worked her way through the layers of disbelief, fear, confusion, and ridicule. She found support and answers in places she had never expected, and through that process began to remember the truth of who she is. And she's going to do a lecture, both Contact in the Desert, which is a conference coming up next weekend, and Alien Cosmic Expo, which is in the end of June in Brentwood, Canada, Toronto. And let's see what else. So she has a book called The Forgotten Promise. We're going to talk about that. Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say before we bring on Sherry?
Well, just it's apparent to us from interviewing people like Sherry that certain people have been chosen as ambassadors for beings that have our welfare in their hearts, and so we've got a lot to learn.
And Sherry, I too am I'm a lifelong contactee experiencer, and I've had overwhelming amount of contact, so this is going to be a very interesting show for me especially. Welcome to the Sacred Matrix, Sherry Wilde.
Thank you. Hi. Nice to be here.
Hi.
Hello.
Very nice to be here. Oh, wait. Can you? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So I have a longer bio for you on aquariumradio.com, my website where I put all my shows. But what would you like to tell our listeners about yourself and your experiences?
Oh, okay.
Your story.
My story?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Well, you summed it up in the intro. I've had contact since I was a little girl, and I didn't know about it. It was hidden from my conscious awareness until 1987, 88, when we had the UFO flap in my community. And that's when the Center for UFO Studies out of Chicago came to Wisconsin, and they did the investigation. And I connected with Don Schmidt, who Don is also going to be at Contact in the Desert. He's now a best-selling author, and he's an expert on Roswell and Area 51. But at the time, back then, he was co-director. He was co-director of the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago, and they did an intensive investigation of all the activity up here. And we met, and he convinced me to eventually allow them to put me under hypnosis to tap into some lost time that I had had. I was very reluctant to trust them to do that. He really had to go very slow. He was really patient with me. I didn't know that there had ever been anything called alien abductions. I'd never heard of that, and I didn't have an opinion about UFOs. It wasn't an interest of mine. It was very bizarre when this all happened to me. I'm Capricorn, and I'm very level-headed and very pragmatic, and the idea of aliens coming and kidnapping a person was just too far out for me to even consider. But he finally convinced me to let them be the ones to regress me, because what he told me was, after he assured me that they could not lead me, because that was my fear. My fear was that they could go looking for the abduction experience, this crazy thing they called the abduction experience. I was afraid if they were looking for it, they could, under hypnosis, they could somehow influence me to have those kinds of memories. But I learned about hypnosis. I learned that's not at all how it works, that in fact you have to you actually go to a place where you are very truthful and honest, and they can't make you say something that isn't real for you. So they used Stanley Mitchell, who was president of the American Hypnosis Society, and he's the one who developed battlefield hypnosis. He was an excellent guy. And under hypnosis, when I recalled what happened to me during the 2 hours of missing time they were investigating, it was life-changing. And as I write in my book, the person that I was when I walked into that office that day in Chicago and the person who walked out were two different people. I was just never the same after that. What you remember? I remembered they investigated a time when I was 17 years old, and because I had 2 hours of missing time, and I'd had a lot of anomalies in my life, a lot of pieces of puzzles that didn't fit together, but we focused on this event, and because there were a lot of witnesses. And so under hypnosis, what I recalled was driving my car down a road and having the car stall, and just the engine just cut out at the same time that I saw 4 men standing in the road ahead of me. One was down in the ditch, kind of, and one of the guys walked out into the middle of the road, which I thought was weird. I was trying to pop the clutch and trying to start my car, but I kept my eye on him because I didn't want to run him over. And he stood right in the middle of the road, and he put his hand up, and I thought, what an idiot. But my car rolled to a stop right at his feet, and he said my name. He said, Sherry, we've been waiting for you. And that absolutely terrified me. And I remembered some of this consciously, but I could never get a fix on the guy's face. And so I had the 2 hours of missing time, exactly 2 hours of missing time. And when we decided to investigate it, I was a little bit disturbed about the whole thing, because I knew that I had 2 hours of missing time and that my car had stopped in the vicinity of these 4 men. And I knew that something traumatizing had happened to me. That's what I just assumed that since I had missing memories, missing time, I couldn't recall anything. So I thought it had to be something fairly traumatic. And yet I don't remember ever having any bruises or having been, any attack of any sort. I had nothing that warranted me thinking that it was a traumatizing event, other than the fact I had buried the memory. So I wasn't sure what I was going to find. Under hypnosis, I was able to see him through the windshield. He leaned on the hood of my car when he said, "Sherry, we've been waiting for you." And I looked out through the windshield of my car, and when I was able to focus on his face, it's an interesting thing what your mind does. My mind kept rearranging his face and trying to make him human. It was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I observed that in myself. And as I was reliving this event, and finally my mind, I had to accept that I was not seeing a human being. I was seeing a classic ET. I've come to know as a classic ET. Back then I didn't know what a classic ET looked like, but he looked a lot like what the Greys look like. And when I saw him, I had the sensibility to lock the doors. I was driving a little VW Bug, and I'd locked both of the doors, and I put my arms on the steering wheel, I crossed them on the steering wheel, and I put my head down on them, and I hung onto the steering wheel, and I was shaking. I was just shaking, vibrating really hard. And he was scolding me to look at him. And he was telling me if I looked, that I would feel better, the fear would go away. And I couldn't do it. I was just too afraid. And then the next thing I know, I feel something brush up against my forearm. And I open my eyes to look, and I see this kind of a tan gray claw-like hand, come in front of me and grab the wrist of my right.
How many fingers and how many fingers did the hand have?
4. Had like 4 fingers. Yeah, it had one was like a thumb, but it was
okay.
I think that's what I think that's. I mean, I don't have the notes anymore. Don would know, but I thought I remembered it being 4, but it could be 4 with a 5th. But I thought it was 4, including the thumb, and long spindly fingers. And he wrapped his fingers around me on that arm, and then another hand came in and on my left arm, and they pulled me out of the car. And I don't know if they even opened the door, which is now I understand that at the time my mind couldn't accept that, but now I understand,
right.
Now I'm used to it. But at the time I remember being, stalling quite a bit over that fact that I didn't think they even opened the door to the car. But they pulled me out of the car. It was these 2 other guys. The main guy was still standing there. And it was these 2 other guys who pulled me out. And they stood by me, had that vice-like grip on my arms, and I stood between them, and I looked at the main guy I knew he was the main guy. He was the one communicating with me. He seemed a little bit taller, slightly, and just a little more, and he was definitely more engaging. So he talked to me for a while, and I stood there and I studied him. And as I studied him, I remember feeling like I knew him, but I couldn't figure out how that could be. But I remember thinking how that skinny neck held up that big, humongous head. I remember looking at and seeing that he had little caves where his ears should be. He had just these little indentations where his nose should be. His mouth didn't appear to be able to even be open. He never opened his mouth when he talked to me. That was startling to me, that I could hear his voice, but he wasn't moving his mouth. And he just talked to me.
Did you feel that communication in any part of your body? Was it really your ears, or where were you hearing the communication?
Janet, I thought it was in my ears, but actually it was in my head. It was just in my head, and since this time I've had lots and lots of contact with him, and that's one of the forms of contact, of communication that he uses. He speaks to me. I don't see him in his body in my, right here in my bedroom where I'm sitting with you now. He comes in through this sitting area here, and I'll have a conversation with him. And sometimes he's here, physically, but more times than not, he projects like an image of himself, and he's like just floating there in the air, but he's communicating with me. So it's like that. I know his voice. I've known his voice is very familiar to me. I would know it anywhere. But at the time that this was happening under regression, I was taking it all in and trying to make sense of it, and I was fighting against it. It's interesting because you're under hypnosis, and it's more like you're watching yourself. You're watching the snippet of time out of your life, and you're reliving it. And I was observing it, but I couldn't change the facts of what was happening because I wanted to. I kept trying to make him human. I kept trying to make it change into something that was real. To me, this wasn't real, and I kept trying to tell myself it was a dream, and I had to wake up in the dream and change it, and I couldn't change it. It was a very interesting experience. So they basically, they took me over to. He said, "Time to go to work now," or "Time to work now," or no, he said, "You know the drill." That's it. He said, "You know the drill."
Yeah.
And he turned around and he started off, and I looked to see where he was going because he just took off like zippity doo-dah across the field, and these two guys started dragging me, and they went really, really fast, and I looked over there, and there was a ship sitting over in the field, a little scout ship, and they took me to the ship, and as we got closer to it, I saw there was another woman there, and I was kind of relieved to see there was another human. As we got closer, I saw she wasn't human. She was humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was humanoid, and she was a hybrid. Since I know her. Her name is Aurora. She's always there when I would go with the guys. They always have her be there to kind of help me. And they told me to go into the ship with her. And the ship was, as I said, a little scout ship. So it was about a diameter. Let's see, what was it about? It wasn't very big. It looked to be no more than 20 feet in diameter, I would say. It looked small, and the ramp folded down onto the ground and was very steep, and so they had to help me climb up it. And when I went into the ship, of course, I thought I was going to have to stoop over. I thought it was going to be very small, but again, another thing that's common is when I got in the ship, it was distorted. It was quite a bit bigger than it appeared on the outside. I didn't have to bend over to stand in there. And it was cold, like it always is. It's very cold in the ship. And she told me I had to get undressed. And I said no. And she took me into the cockpit area, and she started to undress me. And I fought her for a while, but she just started unbuttoning my clothes and started undressing me. And a part of me kind of it's like I remembered, and I was like, yeah, there's no sense fighting this because they're going to do it. And she reminded me that it was for the best, that my body needed to be maintained by them. So I got undressed and went out and laid on the table. And by then, the main guy, I call him D-A, Da, he was out there, and these other guys were with him. The other guys were busy. They were scurrying around doing stuff. I don't know what they were doing. They were going to the back.
Could I interrupt you for just a minute? Yeah. We see Da, but before that, you said that they told you that, or she told you, Aurora said that your body needs to be maintained by them. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Well, I've since come to understand. They used to tell me that they would go over through my body. What they do on the exam is they check out my body to see how it's going, how it's doing, and if it's holding my frequency okay. They've told me that my frequency distorts my body, and that if they wouldn't come in and tweak it, that my body would not be able to sustain itself in a healthy manner. So they come in and they tweak, what they call tweak it. They told me that if they didn't do that, that I would probably not be able to walk, that I had a weakness on my left side, and that it was just something to do with the frequency of my essence. They called it my essence. My essence had a frequency that was a little bit out of sync with the body that I had, and so they just had to keep continually tweak it. So that's what they did. Plus, I was part of the hybridization program. So they also, now that I was older, they were starting to harvest my eggs. So they were doing that. So it's a typical.
Good. I'm glad you got an explanation about what they were doing and why they were doing it. It's not something that everybody knows. They just experience it being done. So they give you explanation.
So remembering this changed everything for you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, go ahead and continue. We're now over meeting Da.
Okay. So you want me to continue with what happened on the? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the exam table, he's taking scrapings off my fingertips and off my skin. Aurora is standing at the head of the table, and she's got her hands on each side of my head, and he's talking softly and explaining what he's doing as he does things, and he's moving around the table, and he's pulling down different instruments, and nothing painful, nothing happening. He's just telling me, explaining to me what's happening. And then at one point he pulls down this syringe with a big needle on the end of it, and I said, "What are you going to do with that?" And he said, I'm going to harvest your eggs." And I said, "No." And I started to cry, and I said, "No," and I started to squirm. And he just looked at me and he kind of cocked his head, and he said, "Why does this bother you?" And I said, "You can't take my eggs." I said, "You can't do that." I said, I want to have children someday, and you can't have them." And so then he came up to the head of the table. He had Aurora step aside, and he put his hands on my head, which instantly calmed me down. And then he stood there and he explained to me that my body would produce new eggs, and it was okay. And he said, "You will go on to have children." He said, "There's no problem." He said, "You're going to have children." And he said, "Can I take your eggs?" I said, "Okay, then." And I said, "Okay." So, and he said it wouldn't hurt, and it didn't. I just felt some pressure. I watched the syringe. I watched it go in, and I watched the fluid come out up through this like a tube. And when he did this, the other 3 little ET guys on the ship had all been busy doing stuff. They were moving in and out of rooms and just looking at some monitors and doing things. But when he did this part of the procedure, they went back into the hallway, and I couldn't see what they were looking at because I was not centered enough to be able to see, because they were facing to the wall in the hallway that I couldn't see. But I assumed there was a monitor or a viewing glass or something, because they were looking at something. 3 of them were standing there, and Da had turned around, and he was working like on a computer. I didn't know what that's what it was at the time, but it was like a computer. And people ask a lot of questions about this. They're like, "What do you mean they had computers?" And but that's what it looked like to me. It was a screen, and it looked like a keyboard of some sort, or some kind of a pad that he was doing stuff in. And after about a minute or so, he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "It is good," whatever that meant. And the guys in the back, I always tell people that it felt like they high-fived each other, that they were all high-fiving each other. The energy in the ship changed. They were all very excited and happy, but they didn't change expression or say anything. They're just dull little guys, but they were excited about it. I could feel their excitement. So I don't know what that was about, but apparently the eggs were viable is probably what it meant. So anyway, right. They did that. Then he said, "Okay, we're done. You can get dressed." So I got dressed, and then I came back out, and he said, "I'd like to ask you some questions. Are you okay with that?" And I said, "Yeah." So I sat on the edge of the table, and I remember this very, very well. I remember this consciously, really. I remember him asking me questions, because his first question was a strange one. His first question was, "Sherry, are you happy?" And I remember when he looked at me, when he asked that question, his eyes just probed into my soul. And I remember thinking, I don't even have to answer you, because you already can see into me and you know the answer. And I also thought, what a strange question for an alien to ask a 17-year-old, because I was 17 at the time. And I thought, they're flying all the way to planet Earth and picking up a 17-year-old girl in Wisconsin, and they want to know if I'm happy. I thought that was bizarre. But later on, it was a big clue as to what my relationship with them was all about. So he asked me if I was happy, and I said, actually, no. I said, "Do you mean, am I happy being here? Because I'm not." And he asked a lot of questions about the Vietnam War, about our president. He asked questions about my life in general. He asked questions about my dating, who I was dating, a lot of questions. And
Wow.
yeah, he did. He asked a lot of questions. And then he said, do you have any questions for me? And under hypnosis, I heard myself say, yeah, can I go up with you in the ship again? And I said the word again. Can I go up with you in the ship again? Can you take me up in the ship again? And under hypnosis, I was like, why did I say that? And his eyes got all twinkly, and he said, so you remember. And I said, I do. And he said, there's not time. He said, we've already kept you a long time as it is. He said, you're probably going to get sick. And then he made a motion, and one of the guys went and got a glass of some stuff for me to drink. And it was like the color of vanilla, and it tasted kind of like vanilla, and it had a little banana flavor in it, but it had a icky flavor in it too. But I drank it all down, and he told me I was probably going to be sick. And I said, why? And he said, because of the difference between your frequency and our frequency, and where we meet in the middle, he said, it's going to affect your body. And he said, you're probably going to be sick later. He said, not necessarily, but probably. And he said, you have to go. We talked longer. I begged him to let me stay with him. And I told him that I didn't belong on this planet. I made what I now know and remember is a plea that I make every time I was with them, from the time I was a little child up through into my 30s, up until I had my own children, I suppose. I would always argue that I should stay with them, that I belonged with them. I didn't belong on the earth, and that I didn't fit in on the planet because the humans were they were cruel, and they were abusive, and I tried to explain to him how they fight wars, and how they make excuses to kill each other, and how they kill animals just for the sport of it. And he got really sad when I was telling him that, and he seemed very compassionate about it, but he said, you can't stay with us. This is where you are on this planet. This is where you belong. And I said, it can't be right. I said, do you know if God ever makes mistakes? And he just kind of smiled. And I said, because I think he made a mistake. I said, there's been a big mix-up. I said, I just do not belong here. Then finally, when he said it's time to go, and he said, you really, really have to go. And so he walked me out, and he said, as we were walking away from the ship, he said, now, as usual, we're going to erase your memory. And I said, I stopped. I remember that. I stopped. We were in the field. We were right by the corner of the ship. And I stopped, and I said, no. I said, don't do that. Stop doing that. And he laughed. His eyes laughed. And he thought that was funny. And I said, no, really. I said, stop doing that. I said, do not erase my memory. And he said, Sherry, we have to. He said, do you know what your life would be like if you remembered this? He said, what would you do? He said, you'd go back and you'd talk about it. He said, what kind of a life would you have? Could you have a normal life if you remembered this? He said, we have to do that. That's for your own protection. And I said, no, I don't like it. I said, I hate it. I said, because next time you come, I'll be scared again, all over again. And he said, we'll be seeing you very soon. And he said, we'll come with the rendezvous ship, and we'll take you up. He was like trying to appease me. And I said, I don't care, but we walked back to the car. And I said, I'm not going to forget. I'm not going to forget. And he just laughed at me, or not laughed at me, but he smiled. He was amused by all that. And I remember he put me in the car, and I reached out. I rolled down my window, and I reached out, and I took hold of his hand, and I said, don't make me go. I said, please don't make me go. And he said, you must. And he said, and you will forget. And I said, no, I won't. So as I drove away, I started to feel the big chunks of what had just happened to me fall away. And I knew I was not going to be able to keep the memory. So I decided to choose 2 words to say to myself. So I decided to say spaceship, and I didn't use the word alien or ET. I used, I think, Martian or spaceman or something like that. And I said those 2 words to myself as I drove to my girlfriend's house, because that's where I was headed, was to my girlfriend's house. And I was only about 5 minutes away from her place. As I drove along, and I kept saying, I think it was little men, little spacemen, and spaceship. I kept saying those words, and the memories were falling away really fast. And I would stop and I'd go, why am I saying that? And then all of a sudden I would get a jolt of it, and I'd be like, oh, yeah. So by the time I got to my girlfriend's house, I was supposed to have been there by 10 a.m. to go shopping with them. And they were going to leave if I wasn't there by 10. I showed up at noon, straight up noon. And I was standing in the kitchen staring at the clock trying to figure out what happened to the 2 hours of missing time when my friend Vicky came into the room. And she said, where have you been? She said, you were supposed to be here at 10 o'clock. She said, you're lucky that the cows got out. Otherwise, we would have left you and, gone shopping without you. So that the cows had gotten out, and they'd been chasing the cows for 2 hours, which covered for me. Yeah, so that, that's how they do it, as you know. Mm-hmm. And I was with her, and I remember I was so baffled by the lost time. And she was standing there looking at me kind of funny. And then I just blurted out, little spacemen and flying saucer or spaceship or whatever the words were. And she said, what? And she laughed, kind of giggled, nervous. And I said, I just saw some little men who were on a spaceship. I said, you have to come back with me. Maybe they're still there. You have to come with me. And she's like, Sherry, what are you talking about? And I said, you have to come with. And then I stopped and I was like, what am I talking about? You just flap in and out of it. But she was used to, Vicky was my best friend during those years from the time I was 15 growing up. And because she was my best friend, she had been on the parameters of a lot of my experiences. She'd been there when I'd gone missing, when we'd been babysitting together. There was a night we were babysitting together at her sister's house. And all of a sudden I jumped up and I said, they're coming. And she said, who's coming? And I said, they are. And I didn't know what I meant, but I just said, you have to hide me. And so we ran, and we ran into the bedroom, and we jumped on her sister's bed, and I was up against the wall, and I said, here, stay in front, and I had her in front of me from the doorway, and I was up against the wall, and there was this buzzing sound that started, and I remember my last thought was, oh, what am I doing? They'll just reach in through the wall and take me, and that's exactly what they did, and I was gone, and Vicky went to sleep. They put her out, but she came awake, and I don't know how much later, but she came awake, and I was gone from the bed. She had heard the buzzing sound, that frequency, and then I was gone, and then she went back to sleep. And then she woke up when her sister came home, and I was back in the bed by then. They had come in a rendezvous ship and picked me up and taken me up, just like they promised they were going to. But they had done that.
For me, it also feels kind of like the barometer drops, like the pressure changes in the room.
Yep. And you get the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You get chills down your arms and down your neck. Yeah, you can. We've had it at the house.
You get the impulse to fight or flight.
Run. I've run out. I've had it so bad, Janet. As hard as it is, I shouldn't even confess to this, but I've actually run out of the house, gotten into my car, and taken off driving, leaving my children behind. I didn't even think, I'm just in a panic. And then when I realized what I'd done, I was like, oh my God. So I went back, but you just get into a panic. I've had it at the house where when they come, there's something about it, the time slows down, and like you say, the barometer or something. But we've actually had, my kids, we've seen frost on our eyebrows, and frost forms on the windshield of the car, and it's summertime, but there'll be frost. There's something about the temperature dropping, and then there'll be there was one time there was on the car there was frost, and they had imprinted it with that triangle. They have a triangular insignia. Yeah, it was imprinted in the frost. It was beautiful. Didn't have cell phones back then, so you couldn't take a picture of it. But yeah, there's just a lot of that stuff. Lots and lots and lots of activity. So that's the main encounter that first awakened me to my contact with these guys, and it was traumatizing. I tried my very best to make the whole experience go away. I tried to find a flaw or a lie in it, and so that I could unravel it. But what happened is that after I underwent hypnosis, contact was still occurring at that time for me and for my oldest daughter. And so they were coming every Friday night, and they were coming a couple other times during the week. So they were coming 2 or 3 times a week. and it was intense activity, and I was missing huge chunks of time. They were coming during the day. They come a lot during the day for me, and they told me they'd do that so it's not as scary for me. But I mixed in with my guys.
You didn't have a job where you had to go to an office or something during that time. You were home with the children.
No, I did. I had a business I was running. I have a real estate company, so I would go to work, and I would be many times I would be driving down a street, and then I remember one day in particular, it was noon, and I was driving, and I remember having the thought, "Where are you going, Sherry? Where are you going? Why are you driving out of town?" And I was like, "It's noon. You should go home to eat or something." And I was driving, heading west out of town, and I remember having that thought, "Where are you going?" And then just like that, in the blink of an eye, I was parked on a side street about 4 or 5 blocks away, facing the other direction. And it was like an hour and a half later. And I would have missing time like that so often, and it would just be seamless.
Did your fellow workers or employees or bosses ever comment or miss you or?
Well, no, I was
going on.
I was the boss, but no, in real estate, you go out and about, and you have your own schedule, and my secretary, everything. They always made sure that there was always a cover. They always picked a time. They always knew when there would be a time where I wouldn't be missed, and where I didn't have to be at an appointment. But it was a lot of activity. It got to be so much I took off work. It was my husband.
So they had your calendar.
What did they want from you?
Yeah, we'll get that.
They were training me for these times that was 1989 that was going on. The harmonic convergence had happened, and I was at the harmonic convergence. I was given what I call my marching orders. I was awakened to my mission, and so they came and they were training me, and I write about it in the book, but it was all about these days of awakening that were coming up, and they said we had so much work to do. And my job was to help awaken people and assist them in awakening. And part of what they taught me was they taught me that time doesn't exist. They taught me how to manipulate time. They taught me about that we're multidimensional beings. They taught me, they taught me stuff all through my whole life as a little girl growing up. But during this time, they just put me through my paces. They taught me to be a light reader. I remember that. That was one of the things that I did during right around, I think it was in 2009 or 10. They had a time where they had a lot of us volunteers had been trained as light readers, and we assisted in reading the light levels of every soul on the planet to help them decide if they were going to if they were ready to ascend with Gaia, or if they were going to hold back and stay in the 3-dimensional path a while longer. We assisted.
What did you find? What kind of statistics? How many are ascending and how many are staying back?
Well, I don't know the numbers. They did tell me back in 1989 when they explained what was going to be happening. It sounded so bizarre to me when they told me that some would be going with planet Earth into the 5th dimension and others would not. They'd be taken to a different planet. I just got so upset by that. And they wouldn't answer my questions. But they showed me to be a light reader. What they told me was at that time, I think the number was only 17% at that time were possibly able to go into the 5th dimension with Gaia. And they said that's more than what they expected. That the harmonic convergence was working. That was part of the thing. It was higher than what they expected, but they wanted a bigger harvest than that. But I don't know what we're up to now.
What do you mean by a bigger harvest?
Well, ideally,
more ascenders.
Yeah, more ascenders. They were hoping that it would be great if every soul on the planet could leave the 3rd dimension, but I don't know what their goal was, and I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know if all are going to make it eventually. I know there are some spiritual teachers who are saying that, everyone, we can't go, just part of us, that all of us have to go, but I don't believe that that's what my guys have trained me. I think what they're telling me is, because he said it many times, that there's no judgment for those that are deciding or needing to stay on a third dimensional timeline. He said that just means that their soul needs more time to experience, more experiences and learn more. So he said there's no judgment on it, but they wanted to get as big a harvest as they could. And so the whole thing is about trying to awaken people. The first year, as we came up on 2012, I remember there was one year I was told to start a group, a spiritual meeting, kind of a meetup group. And they told me that I should try to trigger an awakening in at least 90 people. And I said, how do I do that? Because those were the days when back then we were trying to still trigger people to awaken. And so I started this spiritual group, and then they had me write this book. The book I went off to the desert, and the book, I didn't have any say in it. It just came out of me. They wrote the book through me, which was interesting.
What do they say happens to you when you ascend?
Yeah, what happens when you ascend?
They told me they don't go into detail. It's frustrating because I'll ask questions and he'll say, you know all you need to know right now, or he'll just ignore my questions. If he can answer it, he does, and they usually do it by showing me videos or teachings that way. But I never asked them specifically about the ascension. They just told me that Gaia had made the decision in 1945 to move out of third dimension and to take this time of ascension, which was due to happen. It was calculated to happen now anyway. But she had passed up many opportunities to go into the fifth dimension while she waited for her children to awaken. But she was no longer going to do that because we had reached the point where we were going to destroy her, and her children would through the use of bombs and nuclear explosions or the pesticides or toxins, however, but we were going to kill her. We were killing her. And so she had decided that with or without her children, she had to move on and she could not hold back her ascension any longer. That's what they told me. And so those who couldn't go with her to the fifth dimension would be taken to another planet and continue on their journey. I wanted to know, how does that happen? Are you going to pick them up with a spaceship, or are they going to die and then be born again? And they never explained it to me, but I'm thinking that it's just a new incarnation, when the time comes for the souls that are not going to be going with her. So now, then a couple years later, they invited me to visit Mother Earth as she is in the fifth dimension. They said, do you want to visit? And I was like, yeah, because I'm like looking out my window and I'm going, seeing the chemtrails, and I'm like, we're still in the third dimension. And they're like, no, actually you're not, but it's there. And so they took me to the fifth dimension, and it was so amazing. It was so amazing. There were some people there. I could hear them off in the distance, and they were laughing and talking and that. But I was in this area just out in nature, and everything, it was like Earth, only everything sparkled and shimmered with life. I mean, everything was alive. Every blade of grass was like singing. That's the other thing. There was music.
You can see the molecular structure. You can see the energy moving within everything.
Yes. Yeah, it's beautiful. Sparkles. So they showed that to me so that I would get an idea of what it's going to be like for us when we end up there. And they said that some had already come to the fifth. Some humans had already ascended to the fifth dimension. That there were a handful and that would have been back in about 2010 or 2011 that they did that. So that was interesting. So that's all.
So what I kind of got, and I don't know if it's true or not, but when you were talking about some will stay and go to another planet, what I got is they're not going to know that they're on another planet. I don't think they're going to have to be born into it. It'll be there, and as they can black out our memories and give us selective rememberings of what happens when we contact them, they'll do the same with those who remain, because they're basically kind and not wanting those beings to experience pain and suffering and torture. So it's painless. and as natural as possible. So they'll just wake up, it's a new day, and instead of the population being 7 billion, it'll be 2 billion again. Kind of like what happened after World War II. It was about 2 to 3 billion.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know one of the things that I got was that it wouldn't be on. Though there's going to be some are going to stay behind on planet Earth in the old 3D and on that timeline, and that's a different story. Because that planet, my sense is that planet is going to implode. You know, I mean, that's just going to go away, and only those who are left on that, you know, will have that consequence. But the others, I think it's a matter of them being born onto another planet, and that's what I got. And they'll be seeding there'll be a new planet. I mean, they took me to a planet once that was a lot like Earth, only it was smaller. It was a lot smaller, but it reminded me of planet Earth. And so, I mean, there's plenty of places for them to go. So they'll just incarnate.
Right.
But part of the good news is that those that weren't ready to ascend will be going in parallel into a third dimensional planet, but it won't necessarily be, and almost certainly won't be, a planet of duality or a prison planet. It might have duality, but it won't be a prison planet like this one has been. It won't be as tough. So they'll have an easier time to learn what they need to learn, and they won't be controlled, and you know, they won't have the uphill battle that they've had here on planet Earth. So
you're saying that their transportation is in ships rather than astrally?
No,
or instantaneously.
No, it's instantaneously. It's actually both. It's hard to explain. It depends on what they're doing. They have the ships. They've got all kinds of ships, and they use those when they come into this frequency, into this dimension. And it's like when I went to have my book published, I was with a publisher before I signed on with Dolores Cannon. I actually signed up with another publisher who he actually played an important role in the whole thing, because he had me add a more spiritual bend to my book, which I did, and then I switched over to Dolores Cannon. But in the process of being with him, at one point he said, "I don't understand, in your book you describe Da as like he's a gray, you know, he looks like a gray." And he said, and yet when I ask him once where he's from, he shows me on a star map and Andromeda. And he said, so if he's from Andromeda, he can't be a Zeta. Is he a Zeta, or is he from Andromeda? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about, because I had no knowledge of any of this stuff. And I said, I don't know. I said, I'm only telling you what I know. I said, I described him as he looks. But I said, I also know him in his astral body. And I said, and he looks different when he's not on the planet. I said, when I see him on the ship, he looks different. And he said, well, would you ask him if he's a Zeta? So I asked him, I said, my publisher wants to know if you're a Zeta. And he looked at me and he said, that would not best describe the truth of who I am. And I said, okay. I said, so you're not a gray. I said, then what are you? Who are you? And he said, well, I am what you would call an etheric being. I don't have a body. He said, but when I come onto the planet to do my work, it's a planet of physicality, so I have to have a physical vehicle. So he said, I put on this container. He called it a container. And then he said, it's highly functional. Yeah, it's a very highly functional suit. And he said, that's why your investigators are a little bit puzzled that they see so many different varieties of Zetas and Grays. He said it's because many of us who are etheric, and most of us are who visit your planet, we like the functionality of that kind of suit. And so they come in different colors and slight variations. But he said it's a highly functional suit. So he said that's what we use. And I said,
has he ever shown himself without? Has he ever shown or indicated what he looks like without the suit?
Yeah, he had. Well, I'll finish up with, because I think what he said is pretty cool. Because when I asked him, I said, well, if you're not a Zeta, then who are you? Where do you come from? What are you? And he looked at me, and his eyes got real dark, and he kind of cocked his head, and he said, I am a voyager of the universe, going where needed in service to the Creator. So that's what he said.
Wow.
Yeah. So what he looks like, I've seen him. He actually looks like what I looked like before I came here. We look exactly the same. He's kind of a tall pillar of light that has a little bit of a form to it, but it's mostly then just where his eyes are just these big kind of a luminous blackish, very sparkly light coming out of them eyes. But he doesn't really have any form. He's just kind of looks like an apparition, you know. So that's what. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
So you're saying that's right there. Let's stop before we move past. So you are the same type of being,
right?
And also you are a hybrid gray human being. So is that what you mean by your multidimensional self?
I don't consider myself a hybrid. I mean, I know that somebody wants to check. They want to test my DNA, which is fine, and they probably should find, because I know that my pregnancy was a strange pregnancy, and I know that my body was tweaked to hold my frequency. So I suppose there's some ET DNA in there, but I'm not sure what they'll find. But I don't consider myself a hybrid. What I consider myself is a volunteer, in that I came from different systems, but I came to be of service to Gaia during this time of Ascension. And so I took on a human form. My body is Anunnaki, and it's a very basic.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a very basic, very earthy body, but it doesn't do well. It has a little trouble holding my frequency, but yeah. So I don't consider myself a hybrid. I don't know why it doesn't resonate with me as being what I am. But
does Gaia communicate directly to you?
At times, yeah. Yeah.
What is that like?
Warm, very warm and loving. That's relatively new, and it's infrequent, but it's very. I mean, there's a reason we call her mother. I mean, her love is boundless, endless, and unconditional. There's absolutely just pure love, pure love. I mean, for all the abuses that she's taken, she just loves her children, and we are her children. So
I want to go back to, you said your body is Anunnaki. I'm also an Anunnaki, and it's very interesting to discover that. So, but before I loop your information with mine, tell us about what you mean about your body as an Anunnaki.
Well, I actually, the only reason I know that is Anelia Benz. I don't know if you know Anelia. She's a spiritual teacher. I came in contact with her this last year, and she's the one who told me that I had an Anunnaki body, because I said I didn't know about because I have physical challenges right now, and she said, well, she just kind of mumbled it under her breath that I was Anunnaki, my body was Anunnaki, and when she said it, I knew that was true, and I didn't know, you know how you have that, how you have that knowingness, you have that, there's a lot. Right. Yeah, and you either know it or you don't know it. And I knew that was true. And I was like, oh, I said, I don't know what that means. And I still don't know what it means, except that my body is, after I give my lectures, I have people come up. One of the first times I spoke publicly, I had a lady come up and she asked if I was vegetarian. And she got quite upset with me when I told her that I wasn't. And I said, I am. I think it's a horrible thing to eat animals. I think it's disgusting to eat animals. And I said, it's the most disgusting thing ever. But I said, my body has a different opinion. My body requires that I give it, flesh, like that I eat meat like that. I tried not. I said I tried to not eat it because I overruled it, but my body got very sick, and they forced me to go back to eating meat. So I take it that having an Anunnaki body must mean that it's a pretty basic body. I don't know. I don't know. Right. Yeah. Very earthy.
What's your blood type?
I don't even know. And I've had so much blood drawn because I was attacked this last year, and they poisoned me. And so I've had all kinds of blood work done, and I keep meaning to ask them to tell me what my blood type is so that I know. But it might be. Is there something called O negative or something?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm O negative.
It means you're universal donor, and you don't have a rhesus factor in your blood.
Yeah, the reflexes. They get.
I don't know if that's what I am or not. I don't know. I don't know. I got to ask them.
Yeah. Interesting to find out.
So you were attacked? Can you say some? Is this something to do with what you're disclosing?
Yeah, because
we're having feedback.
Oh,
Not sure what's going on.
Got it?
I don't know. Maybe Sean adjust it. I'm gonna go ahead.
I didn't move. Everything's still the same on my end.
No.
Oops. Was that you? Are you there?
No, I'm still here. I think Sean's might be trying to correct something. Okay, we're going to the break in about 2 minutes, so maybe he can unconnect and reconnect.
Okay.
Because we are getting feedback. Okay, so we have
the assault, the attack.
Yeah.
That was a result of me being such a blunt speaker about talking about it being a prison planet, talking about the ETs are benevolent, telling people that they've been lied to and manipulated and controlled. They didn't like it that I was being quite so outspoken about that, and so I was warned and not to talk about it. But I do, and I still do, and but the attack was pretty brutal, and so it was. I'm going to be speaking about it at the contact.
Who's they? Was it men? Was it people? Was it ETs? Who was it?
We'll find out after the break. We'll be back in 3. We'll leave that cliffhanger. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, she'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha. Are we back? Sorry. Welcome back to Aquarium. No, we're not Aquarium Radio. We're the Sacred Matrix on freedomslips.com on Revolution Radio. And I'm your host, Joanna L. Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin. And we are talking to experiencer Sherry Wilde. But before we get back to this episode, okay, we are back. Okay, before we get back, or before we bring back Sherry, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on freedomslip.com and donate what you can. $1, $5, $15, $20, whatever you donate is greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donation. Sherry, are you there?
I am, yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. Sasha, we're back. He'll be back in a second. You know, we used to have a 5-minute break, and we kind of got used to that. Now it's a 3-minute break. It's like, it didn't work. Okay, before we left, we had a wonderful cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And what was our cliffhanger, honey? You're back.
It was who are the people that attacked you?
Yes, we're talking
were they
about your
people even?
attack, and you were saying it was a poisoning. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was poison, and it was alpha radiation, and it was what they call Trojan horse implants. So they hit me with all three of those at the same time. So it was pretty brutal. And I tell you, we were working with the Draco at the time. We had agreed to work with them, and I know people thought I was crazy to do that, but they came and asked if they could work with us. And I personally have a soft spot for them. I think I really like them. At least the ones that I've interacted with. They're very childlike and almost innocent. It's like they don't understand the ways of the humans. And these guys had told us that there were 5 of them. They told us they were a breakaway group and that they wanted to go from service to others to service to self, and would we work with them in that capacity? And so we agreed. And some have told me.
So who's the we that you're talking about? Who's on the party to?
Oh,
So you had some Dracos.
Oh yeah, my partner Jim, the
Okay.
guy that I'm in a relationship with. So they were coming in and giving us Reiki. It was kind of cute. I'm gonna talk about it in the lecture because they're really the Draco. They're kind of cute, and different. But so I've had different people tell me that there was one that was a renegade in them, and that he was the one who initiated the attack on me. But I that doesn't really resonate with me. What I'm getting and what I'm feeling is that it's what we call the controllers, and so they were not what I don't consider them human either, but I don't consider them disease. They're just its. They're cold. They're its, and they're evil. They're just they're evil.
The evil its.
Yeah,
they're like. Are they archons or something? I hear some people call those.
I don't. I mean, the warning came from the Men in Black, so it's that. I really don't know because I don't focus on it. But it was an interesting experience that I went through, and I'm physically incapacitated from the attack.
Wow.
I'm still, I have trouble getting around. I'm not sure if I'll be able to walk much longer, but I'm keeping a positive attitude, and I'm gonna hope, everything will work out just fine. I'm sure of that. I'm not getting worried about it, but it's been quite a time of it. So
have your guides helped you fight the poison and the problems that you have from being attacked?
No, my guys, when I asked them if they could come in and fix my body, I got a really strange response from them. What I got was, "You've got this, Sherry, you've got this." And I was like, really? I nearly died. I know Jim gets really mad about it. He thinks they should come in and fix me, but they told me back in July or August of 2013, I think it was the last time that I saw them, that they said that they would not be coming in anymore. And the next time they would see me physically, it would be on the ship, and that I would be coming to them. And they said, continue to raise your frequency, continue to open your pineal gland. You'll be with us before you know it. And I said, why aren't you coming in? Why aren't you going to be coming in? And they showed me like this. They showed me this thing that looked like a bunch of plates sliding. Like you've seen these demonstrations of when earthquakes happen, and they show you how the plates. Yeah, they showed me like that, and it reminded me of that. What they showed me, and what it meant was something about our frequency, that we were jumping all over the board. We were jumping into different timelines so rapidly, and we were just all over the place. They said that they needed to stay where they were at and allow us to go through our ascension hands off at this time, and that it was difficult for them to come in at this time and to be here. So they're out there, but they're not. I hear from them every now and then. I didn't hear from them for a while because when the attack occurred, my frequency dropped because the alpha radiation. That alpha radiation is really nasty, and it suppresses your immune system and your frequency. And I had lost my ability.
How did they deliver the poison, the alpha radiation, and the Trojan horse implants?
The Trojan horse implants, they kept putting them in, and the Draco kept taking them out.
Is that a physical or a psychic implant?
No, it's physical. And the first time I found one, I found blood on the sheets after they had removed one. I'd come awake during the night, and they were putting it in, and I'm not supposed to have implants. I was told that, my guys don't use implants. That's barbaric. They don't do it. Mm-hmm. They don't need it to find me or track me. So I'm not supposed to have any, so I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was just a dream. But then there was blood on the sheets, and they showed me that it was from this implant. They would put them in, and this group would put them in, and the Draco guys I was working with would come and take it out. So we had the implants going on, which are terrible because you hear it. It's like you're sharing your body with another entity, and you hear your thoughts are not your own. I would hear this voice in my head talking and saying bizarre things, like, why don't you just kill yourself today? Isn't it a good day to die, Sherry?
Wow.
Things like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really horrible.
It's like they put a virus in you, and the malware cleanser is fighting it every night, and your body is the computer they're fighting over.
Yeah, it is, and the story is pretty interesting. If you get a chance to hear because it's a really interesting story of how this all unfolded for me. The other thing, so while they were doing that, then they also did the alpha radiation, which I didn't know what that was. That sound was at night. I would hear it at night. I'd wake up and I'd be like, what is that? And I got up, I checked to see if my furnace had come on, if my water pump was running, but it didn't sound like that. You know the sounds of your house, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I went down to my basement. I went outside, I looked above my house. I knew it wasn't a helicopter. I've had those, but it was something that was like a vibration. It sounded like something outside the house because it seemed to like envelop the house. It's very hard to describe, but it sounds like a jet is flying over, but it's not leaving. It's just like it's droning on and on.
Where do you live right now? What part of the world?
I live in southwestern Wisconsin, out in the country. So I got in my car and I drove around my neighborhood. I thought somebody was operating a business that started at 10 o'clock at night because I would never hear this during the day. It would come on at night. One night, and this is what they do. They do this on purpose. One night when I got into bed, because they did it when Jim was never here. It was almost always when he was gone. I got into bed one night. I reached over, I turned off my lamp, and when the light went out, the sound came on. And I was like, there it is. I turned the lamp back on, the sound went off. And I was like, oh man. And then I turned the light back off, the sound came on. And it's just, they do that just to prove, to toy with you, to freak you out. I swear they do. And I found out later it was alpha radiation. I knew that my dog was getting sick, very, very sick. And he and I were both, after that we would hear the sound at night, it would run for 20 minutes to half an hour to maybe an hour, and then it would go away. In the morning after having that, I would be very foggy brained, very, very foggy. Couldn't think straight, had no energy. I was not able to meditate. I always had a routine of getting up in the morning and doing my Course in Miracles and meditating. I had open communication with my higher self, with my angels, with my guides. I could call on Da. All that was gone. I couldn't even hold a thought in my head. I could barely say my name. It was terrible. It was alpha radiation. They let you know. They don't want to do all this and not let you know what they're doing to you. So they did that, and then the poison came in the form of some tablets that I was given to take because I got so sick from the malware and from the radiation. I was very weak and shaky, and I ordered some supplements that a doctor had recommended for me in Sedona, and he came highly recommended, and I took those supplements, but they had been tampered with, and they were pure lead. Yeah, they were poison, which poison is a favorite form of theirs to attack you with. So I ended up in the hospital, and so I still have a lot of poison in my body, a lot of it.
Oh, wow.
Hard to get it out. But anyway, so it's an interesting story, but
Do you know what the content of the poison is? What was it?
It was lead. It was pure lead. The tablets they weren't just laced with lead. They were pure lead. I mean, the reading on each tablet was 50,600 mgs or whatever they call it. Yeah, it was off the charts. Yeah, the doctors, they didn't know. They've never seen. There's been no. I guess there's been nobody with lead levels as high as what I had. I was 89. Wow. Yeah, and 20.
Did you get back to the doctor?
Yeah, the doctor that gave it. Did he get?
I tried to reach him. I got word to him through one of the people who had recommended him, and she just reported back to me that he was devastated by it, and that he had never, in all his years, he'd been doing this for over 20 years, he'd never had anything like that happen, and that she said she wasn't even sure if he was going to continue to work because he was so disturbed by it. But I don't blame him at all. I mean, I know what happened. It came through the mail and it was intercepted, and what was sent to me was not what I got. So. Wow. Yeah. I mean, they meant to kill me, and if they meant to kill me, they would have killed me, which they almost did. But I had help. You asked about Mother Earth. She, my 3 ET families, my soul family, and Gaia all asked for intervention. They went to Anelia Benz and asked her to intervene on my behalf, and because I was on my way out. Wow. Yeah, and she intervened and she told me what was going on. I didn't know, and I didn't know. I just kept saying, "What's going on? What's happening to me?" But when you're sick and you're in that weak of a condition and that confused and foggy brained, right, you can't connect the dots. I mean, literally, I was in a stupor, and it was a nightmare. It was just a pure nightmare. And but Anelia, wow, she saved my life. They went to her and asked her to intervene, and she made an exception. She didn't usually do it, but she said when Mother Earth asked if I would, she said one of my greatest champions is under attack. You need to intervene. And she said, mm-hmm, when she got asked by her, she said, I thought I better look at this. I better consider doing this. So she did. She intervened. She had me meet with her, and we spent 4 days together, and she explained to me what was going on. And I tell you, that was a real wake-up call for me. I did not think things like that happened. It sounds crazy. But
Well, it sounds like you've got an important mission, and you're not through by any means.
Well, that's, what I said, why me? I said, there's bigger fish out there to go after. Why would they go after little old me? I mean, I have one little book. I talk every now and then and stuff. But what Anelia said was, she said, you're having more impact than what you realize. She said, when I looked at it, she said, it's like when you drop a pebble into the water, and she said, and that ripple goes out. She said, you're reaching way more than what you think. And she said, and it's going to continue. She said, you're having a big influence and you're having a big impact. And she said, they see that and they know that. And she said, plus, she said, what she got was they don't like the way I deliver the message, because I deliver it in such a way that it's I don't know, the way she said was, she said, you just put it right out there. And she said, the way you say it, it's just very, people hear the message as I speak it. So I don't know. So I haven't backed down any. As a matter of fact, it's made me more determined. I'm speaking,
mm-hmm.
I was going to quit because of my health, but I'm going to hobble out to Contact in the Desert. They've got a cart for me because I can't walk very well.
Oh, wow.
So they have a cart for me, and, I'm just more determined to do it even more. So.
Right. The more difficulty you have to go through, that just is a way of showing to you how important your mission is.
I guess, but I'm not the only one. I mean, there's millions of us that came as volunteers. Not all of us do the same thing. We all have our role to play. Every one of us do, like you guys do. So
you got the mic, and you have a chance to reach a lot of people now. There's going to be 6,000 people out there in the desert.
Yeah. About 3,000 maybe.
Well, I think
so.
Actually, they told me last year. Were you there last year? Did you go?
I was at the first one. So has it grown to 5,000 or 6,000? How big is it now?
Yeah, they told me. I thought they said between 4,000 and 5,000 last year. So it's a big crowd. And I was very excited to be invited out there last year. I was sick as a dog when I flew on the plane out there. I was so sick, but I wasn't going to miss that for anything. And I didn't think I could get through my lecture, and standing out there in the heat. And the guy who puts the thing together, he said, I pop in and out of the lectures. He said, I move around, like to catch 10 minutes of everybody's lecture that's talking. He said, let me tell you, I stopped in to hear yours. And he said, I couldn't leave. And he immediately asked me back again. So I said, really, because I don't even remember. I think what happened is my guys took over. Somebody took over for me because I was in such a bad shape. I remember I couldn't stand hardly. And, it's just all a blur. And I couldn't sell my books. I couldn't sit at my table. I had to go back to my room in between my workshop and in between talking. I didn't get to hear any of the other lectures or anything. I spent all my time in bed when I wasn't, speaking. But this year I'm a little bit stronger this year. I'm not mobile, but I'm stronger. Hopefully I'll be able to take in some of the other speakers, because it's a good group of people that are out there.
Right, it is. Well, we'll be there, and we're going to be at Alien Cosmic Expo as well. So I'm looking forward. I'll come over and introduce myself and give you a big hug.
Yeah, well, I've seen you. I mean, we've been at conferences. We've been at several conferences together, but I've never had the opportunity.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's hard, We're there as presenters, and we have schedules. And with me being sick this last year and a half, any conference I go to, I can't be very social as it is. But I'm hoping to feel better. So yeah, definitely.
So what's the latest, or what information do you intend to convey about the attack? But is there any positive things that you're going to convey?
Absolutely, Janet. Because I do not want to add more fear. There's already more than enough fear on the planet, and I'm not here to bring more fear. And I'm not here to play the role of a victim. And my message is just the opposite of that, which is that we can't be a victim. So I really struggled a lot because I kept getting pushed to talk about the attack, which I don't like to even call it that. But I kept getting pushed to talk about it, and I kept saying, I can't talk about it because I can't put it in the context where it doesn't come off with me being a victim. And I just went round and round with it, and I just relaxed about it and let it just come through. And so, yes, I will be talking about the attack, but only putting it in the context of this is the world we live in, a three-dimensional world of contrasts, of evil versus good, light versus dark, but it's a world of our own making. And so the talk I give is, I think it's going to be interesting. I hope that people find it interesting, because I'm going to come at it and tell that story, but I'm going to do it from a third dimensional perspective. But then I'm going to take them to the fourth dimension, and where we can look at it from that perspective, and then end up in the fifth dimension and looking at it from unity consciousness. And let's look at this and see what's really happening now. And that way I can compare my own experiences, because that's why things happen to me. I mean, this happened to me for a reason. I allowed this to happen. I agreed to allow this attack to happen. There's something in it that I'm supposed to get, that I'm supposed to share and pass on. That's the whole reason for having experienced it. So I'm going to share that from a level of unity consciousness from the fifth dimension, what's really happening. And I compare the attack that's happened to me to what's happening on the planet right now with the chemtrails, the GMOs, our food being poisoned, our immunizations, forced immunizations, with the abuses that are happening in every arena, and compare that to what I experienced and how it's all of our own making. It's all of our own doing, and there's no one out there really doing it to us. The truth of it is that we are all one mind, and that we are all oneness. And we have to look at this, and we have to start living like we are already in the fifth dimension. If we want to get to the fifth dimension, we have to bring that about. The ETs are not going to come and save us. They're not going to do, that's not their role at all. They're just here to observe us and to guide us, but they're not going to come in and save us. We have to do it, and we have to change our thoughts. We have to wake up and remember who we are and claim our own power. That's how I got rid of it. That's why I can sit here and talk to you now and not be worried they're going to come in tonight and kill me, is because I got my head cleared out enough, claim my power, And I told them, you can't touch me. You're not allowed to even come near me. And they have to honor that. And we have to do that when it comes to the chemtrails and the weaponized food and all the other crap that's being dumped on us by the controllers or the powers that were trying to take away, our powers by keeping us in fear. We have to stand up for ourselves. We have to understand that we're creating this by our complacency. We're allowing this. People wring their hands and cry about the chemtrails and saying, oh, are they going to spray us again today? I wish they would leave us alone. Well, you know what? Stop acting like a bug. Stop acting like a worm. You're powerful. You're God. The humans have forgotten their true divine nature, and they have to remember that, and they have to, claim that. So that's what I'm going to convey in my talk. Hopefully it ends on a very positive note, I hope.
So how can we stop the chemtrails?
Well, I've trained a lot of people to get rid of them by just loving them, by seeing them for what they are, seeing them as a joke, as they're just a lower frequency showing up as a part of the game that we're playing of duality in this world. And if you see them for what they are, that they're not really real because they're such a low frequency, that if you are centered in your heart and you can find love in your heart, and when you can look out there and you can actually send love and see it for what it is, the chemtrail will disappear and your skies will be clear blue. That in people do, and we call it busting chemtrails. And you just do it through the power of love. And that's how it's going to happen. That's why the fifth dimension really is here. The third dimension is just an overlay. It's a distortion in energy that's overlaid over our pristine planet Earth. And it's just a distortion caused by our fear. If you can move out of your fear and you can get centered in your heart, you'll be in the fifth dimension. That's where it takes you, is to a higher frequency. And that's how it's going to happen. So
I had a couple instances this year to try to bring that home. We had Prince die and David Bowie. Now, I'm not like a fan or anything, but they both came to me to explain that we're not dead, that we're in this other dimension. So perhaps speaking to you, they are already in the fifth dimension, and they're not in the bardo. It was an incredibly high energy. It was very fifth dimensional type energy that they were conveying to me. It wasn't a lot of conversation, but here I am, look at this. And actually, Prince kind of like merged with me while I was sleeping, and then he was communicating with me, and then when I woke up, he was still communicating, and he said, I just want you to feel what what's it's going to feel like. You had the visual, what it looks like, but he said, this is what it feels like when, you shift into fifth dimension. And thank you, Prince, by the way, for doing that.
Yeah, what did you experience, Janet? What did it feel like to you? What did you feel?
Well, I go there a lot when I travel, astrally. I go there frequently, and I call it different. I always say I was on Nibiru last night, and I'm pretty like stoned and high and like a higher vibratory frequency. I don't do drugs and stuff like that, but it's what I imagine it feels like when you're really high on light and love and consciousness, right?
Yeah.
It's just a different vibratory frequency. It's very joyous and blissed out. I feel blissed out. Of course, I settle back into my life with all these things I have to do, but I think that helps me recharge so I can. That people say to me, Janet, how do you do all that you do? And it's like, well, I'm having these fifth dimensional experiences, and then I come back here. So maybe I was talking to Alfred Weber, and he says some of us are already in the fifth dimension. I live in Maui, where they said the Ascension process is starting, and I'm right at the bottom of, what's our mountain called, honey?
West Maui Mountain. West
Maui Mountain, but there's Iki Crater up there, which is supposed to be the home of the gods, and the Anunnaki are up there. So maybe this part is already kind of ascending, and that's why I feel so good being here. I go to the mainland, and I'll be spending a week or so in the mainland, and it's like I can probably recharge. And yeah.
Interesting. That's what it is. People, when I am with my guys physically aboard the ship, I always want to stay with them, and because it feels so, like you say, blissed out. But it's a quiet, calm kind of bliss. It's I say you're in the presence of beings who know you, They know you intimately. They know your thoughts. They know everything about you, and they love and accept you in spite of it. That's how it feels. It's like, geez, these guys, they love me. They would do anything for me. They just love me. When they look at me, there's just all this love pouring out of their eyes, all this light, and they know me, and still they love me. There's no judgment. There's no criticisms. There's nothing. There's just love and acceptance, and it feels really good to be known like that, which you can't know on this planet. It's the hardest thing on this third dimensional planet that I found was how you communicate, having to use words instead of having one mind. Yeah, it's very hard to communicate. And so there's all these distortions and all these perceptions that cause, all these arguments and problems between people, because everybody's got their own perception of what just happened or what was just said or what's supposed to happen. Whereas in that dimension, there's no miscommunication. It's not possible because you're just sharing your mind. Your thoughts are all shared. And so, yeah, it's great to have that kind of experience and to know that it's possible. So I'm very much looking forward to leaving the third dimension behind. I am never coming back to a third dimensional planet. It's not one of, well, it wouldn't be bad if it wasn't a prison planet. The awakening on this planet is doubly hard than most planets that we assist, because on this planet, it's a prison planet, and it's been, you've got the chemtrails and you've got all that. There's a lot of fear to the awakening process on this planet. Usually when a planet awakens, it's just moving from love into a higher state of love. But on this planet, it's moving, awakening means there's the awakening, and then there's waking up to the chemtrails and to the fact that our government has, lied to us and is poisoning us, and all the other things that are going on, and who's really in control, and the whole truth of it. You don't have that on a regular type of a planet. That kind of thing doesn't generally, it happens certainly, but to the extent that it happened here, this is the first, as far as my limited knowledge. Isn't
that perhaps an accelerator, having the polarity in these things to wake up and realize part of this ascension process? I'm reflecting on what you said in 1987. It was before 9/11, and after that, it seems like these things that happen make the dark darker, but that also accelerates the light lighter and faster.
Yeah. It's a choice that was made by all the souls that came here, whether to come as a volunteer or come onto the planet to experience those contrasts to that level. I think that it fell and went on. My sense of it is that it went on longer than was intended. That the souls that got trapped here, they got caught in the cycle of reincarnation and that whole game of karma, and that was a game that was put in play by the controllers to keep them here and to not allow them, even in death, to move on to another planet, to reincarnate onto another planet. They kept them cycling back here, telling them that you have to come back. There's lessons you have to learn, and they greet you. They pretend like they're benevolent beings, and they greet you when you pass over and say, oh, let's review your life together here. And, look at here, you need to go back. And that's all a big game. And I know, it seemed like it made sense to have it be that way, but that's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to evolve and awaken, but our lives are very short on this planet. 60, 70, 80 years is all that you live. And so there's just a lot of inhibitors on the planet. Your DNA was tampered with. There's just a lot of reasons why humanity was not allowed. So you think
on the other side, when we die in this current 3D Bardo type experience, that we don't really touch base with higher realms? We're just stuck, or do some people go higher and then they volunteer to come back? I have experience where I went beyond that, but it's like, okay, well, I got to go back and help.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I don't want to leave anybody, no one left behind type of thing. It's like, no. I don't want to do this without everybody. So let's go back in again and do it one more time just to accelerate the process.
I know it, and that's the game that was played. It's no longer in play. It's different now. Definitely. The souls that have passed over that are disembodied, they're being processed now and moving on to wherever it is that they're resonates with them. So they're being they may already have been processed because they were doing that some time ago. But but back in the day, yeah, on the 3D planet, when you died, you went to the astral plane, and it depended on your frequency. It depended on your level of awareness. How aware were you? And was it a conscious death, or were you in fear when you died? And how much awareness did you take with you? I think it would vary according to your level of frequency, your frequency. So a lot of times, though, you get greeted by the beings who seem to be people that you know, or they feel very loving toward you. They can be tricksters, though. They're the ones who say, well, let's take a look at this. Because you always had the choice to go onto a different planet to continue your growth and to move off of planet Earth, but almost it wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening. So there was a game of recycling the souls and keeping them trapped here for just millions of years, really. Some of the souls on planet Earth they've been here for the longest time, and they're beaten down and very discouraged and hopeless. A lot of them feel hopeless, and a lot of those souls are the souls that aren't awakening for the harvest this time, because they've just been here for so long, and the guilt and the pain is so stamped on their soul and so entrenched in their being. It's going to take, they're going to need a lot of care and a lot of help and nurturing to come out of that. So it's quite a process.
Well, hopefully we can, as more and more of us wake up, we can reach critical mass, and then there'll be awakening for everybody, because it just seems, I couldn't imagine going through another cycle, 26,000 year cycle, or whatever, thousands of years, millions of years cycle. You wanted to say something, Sasha? You look like you wanted to say something.
I'm kind of in a different place. I've been gifted by this wonderful existence. This is the best of times for me, and I know that a lot of people are suffering, but I'm happy. I live in Maui. I have a beautiful wife who loves me. My father was a great guy and taught me how to love, and I'm happy. And if the world goes to hell, I'm sorry, but I'm enjoying myself.
Well, it's an individual experience, and that's the way the Ascension should be. That's great that you're experiencing it that way. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's scary, and they don't know what's happening to them, and so it's not all peaches and cream right now for everybody. So it depends. It's an individual thing, definitely, but it's at the same time, we're part of oneness. So what you experience affects everyone else too. So you're right about the 100th monkey. If enough of us get our frequency up there, if we do reach the tipping point, it does have the effect of pulling everybody, the other souls along with us, definitely.
Well, I remember how life was before the Berlin Wall came down. And within, a day or so, we went from one reality to another. Yes. And occasionally over the years would hear stories about, I escaped the Berlin Wall, and they would just have these incredible stories, and then now it's gone. So I envision this disclosure, experiencer type reaction to all of us coming out with their stories will be much akin to what happened with the Berlin Wall, and then some, like times 1,000. Because you have this incredible story, but the more we tell our stories, there's a need to tell right now, and the more people are coming out, and there are people like myself. I have all these radio shows, and I have sometimes shorter segments, and someone comes on for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but they start telling their story, and once they start telling their story, there's other people listening and said, well, that happened to me too, and I'll come and say it as well, or I'll start talking to my family, and then that's making that veil, that wall, come down on another whole level.
Exactly. That's
very
what
exciting.
I tell people that when they write to me, and because I get emails every day from people who stumble across my YouTube videos or hear me lecture or something, and they a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, you're brave," or something like that, or "Thank you for speaking up. I've had experiences, but I can't talk about them. I tried talking about them, but I was told to not." And I always say, I'm speaking so that it makes it easier for you to speak. And when you find your voice, I would be very appreciative of, you adding your voice to mine, but if you're not comfortable, that's fine. But the reason I'm talking is so that others will feel comfortable talking. It cost me a lot to do this, but I'm happy to do it. But I said, how else are we going to change the world? If we all sit with our heads under a bushel basket. So we have to speak up, and we have to make these things normal. Talking about ETs, it always kills me that people have trouble. But I have to look back and remember who I was too. But people who have trouble believing that there's life out there, I go, really? Really? Statistically, how can you even deny that there's life out there? It's not even possible that there's not life out there. But there are some people who are just so afraid of that they can't even allow themselves to imagine it. So it's trying to slowly get people acclimated, because the world is going to change rather quickly. And
yeah, well, it's Occam's razor in a way, because when you evoke and study the extraterrestrial presence, it makes the facts hang together and accounts for more of the observed data, the phenomenological data, the things that people experience. And so it's a more efficient explanation, even if it's hypothetical. It's still better than the other crap that we've been buried under.
Right. I agree. I tell people when they say they think it's strange that I talk to ETs and that they come visit me and stuff, and I say, well, have you ever had somebody visit you from Zimbabwe? And they say, no. And I say, well, then Zimbabwe must not exist. And they say, what do you mean? I say, well, if you've never had experience firsthand, I said, what's the difference? I said, it's probably not real. There probably is no such place as Zimbabwe, and there's probably no people there, because if you haven't met them, I said, that's the logic that you're using, right? It's just great. So anyhow, yeah. But it's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I see that you're going to be on a panel with the host Clyde Lewis and Whitley Stryber, David Jacobs, Travis Walton, yourself, Jeremy Corbell, Victoria Givian, Vian. That's going to be quite a mix there.
Yep. I was on. Yeah. Go ahead. Well, I was
just going to. Your turn.
I was just going to acknowledge it. I was just going to acknowledge it and say I love being on experiencer panels like that when the audience gets to ask questions. I think that's the most fun part of doing lectures. I think is the interaction with the audience. So I have a 2-hour lecture, and I'm going to try to get it done in an hour and a half. So I have at least a half hour of Q&As, because it's a lot of fun to interact with the audience, especially there's people out there, really interesting people come to these conferences, and everybody's got a story. And I don't have time to listen to every story, but I love interacting with the audience, and I love questions because it's challenging, and I love to be challenged. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
A lot of people have experiences at the conference itself.
I know, that's common. Ozark Mountain Conference also, pretty much every time I go there, we have had ships show up over the little town. We have it in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and I know, was it last year? I think we had a ship over the hotel where we were having our dinner. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So, and that's not, I know I was at Gulf Breeze years and years ago when they had the big Gulf Breeze sightings. I went to a conference down there, and we had lots of sightings down there. So they know, and they know who they're showing themselves to. They do that purposefully, definitely. So.
Besides the Greys, have you had contact with, like, the Mantis? You said you had contact with the reptilians. And what other beings have you seen or had contact with?
I've had the tall whites. I've got Pleiadians. I have Pleiadians here right now with me, and actually they're standing guard over me till we get through this. So I have Pleiadians, and I've been working with the Pleiadians. I've been working with the Ashtar Command for a long time. So I work with 3 different groups, and everybody wants to know who are they, and I only recently, I never bothered to ask because I don't don't think in terms of that like that. I know, yeah, you know what I mean? I know them energetically. Just like people, I don't see bodies very easily. If I see somebody and they do something different with their hair or they lose a lot of weight or something, I probably won't notice it because I don't see bodies very well. But I feel more, I go by their energy. So I think that I'm dealing with Pleiadians and then Da, which I don't know. I think he's from Andromeda, but I'm not sure. They're the Guardians. They've been around for a long time. He's a six-dimensional being. And I don't even know who the third group is. But I've had interactions with a lot of different beings. I've had the mantis people. I've had them here. But they didn't look like mantis. They were just round red blobs of light zipping around in my room. And they're really playful and funny, and very curious and extremely intelligent. But
does your partner see them as well?
Well, yeah, that's part of. I think. Am I going to talk about that? Yeah, I guess I am going to talk about. We've been together 4 years, and if you're going to be in a relationship with me when I'm having activity, you have to be prepared for this stuff. And so he started becoming aware that he would wake up at night, and I would be gone from the bed. And then he would hear me sometimes out here in the sitting room carrying on a conversation with some, and I explained to him what was happening. Then one night I was gone on the ship physically. I wasn't going physically as much, but I was physically that night gone. And I came back to bed, I crawled into bed and I woke him up. I was cold. It was, and he got out of bed and he went to use the bathroom and he saw the ship sitting down below the house in the field. And he was like, what the hell is this? Come look at this. And he said, look at what your neighbors, look at these lights they've got. And I was just laying in bed, I was laughing. And he's like, that's impossible. How can they have such bright lights? He was looking at the ship and he didn't know it. So the next morning I was like, well, show me which neighbor, because he's like, you got to go talk to your neighbors. They can't have lights like that. That's ridiculous. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, show me which neighbor, because I live in the country and the houses aren't that close. But I said, show me which neighbor it is. And he went to the window and he's like, oh, wait a minute. Oh my God, there's no house there. And I was like standing behind him. I was like, wait for it. And then pretty soon he turned and he looked at me and goes, oh, I saw a ship, didn't I? I saw a UFO. And I said, yep. And he said, oh my God. He said, and the lights are so bright. They're so bright. If you've seen them, so you know. And he got excited then, and he said, okay. He said, I'm ready to meet him. He said, ask him if I can meet him. So I asked Da if he would pick him up and have a meeting with him. And he said, no, not yet. He's not ready. Perhaps later. And I told Jim that. And he said, well, what does that mean? And I said, I don't know. I said, it just means you're not ready. So we forgot about it. And then 4 months later, he got picked up. He was on his way to my house after he refereed a high school football game, and he was driving alone back the back roads to my house. And he had an encounter. And I'm going to talk about this in my talk because it's part of it, because his encounter was with the Draco. And that was our first, well, it wasn't, it was our first meaningful contact. They had been popping in and out of my house for a few years. And I'd just been having my own communication with him, but he had a meeting with them. And that's when they asked if we would work with them. And that's how we started our relationship with them, kind of grew out of that. So yeah, he's on board with what happens with me, definitely. He has to be. He's had enough experiences here, which it's like my girlfriend Vicky, that I was when I was a teenager. I would go missing from the bed, I'd stay overnight at her house and I would just be gone. But she didn't know. She would just say, I woke up last night, where were you? And I'd be like, nowhere, I was in nowhere. And she's like, no, you were gone. Where you go during the night? So the pieces all fall into place eventually. Or they see the blue light. They hear the 3 raps on the wall. There's a lot, and then.
One time they took me home and they left me at this park, which was at night. It was dangerous to be there, right? And all of a sudden I'm in the park. It's like, don't leave me here. Yeah. And then they picked me up again. They put me right inside right, like coming in the front door, my mother comes down and goes, are you trying to leave? She thought I was trying to leave, but I was coming back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they unlocked the door for you, so I could come back in, walk in the house. I know some people get locked out and they're out in the yard, but they were kind enough to open the door. But my mother was really freaked out, like, don't leave. What are you doing, Dad? What are you doing?
That's what at my friend Vicky's house, she lived on a dairy farm. So her dad had cows and pigs and stuff, and they dropped me one night. I write about it in my book. They dropped me in the middle of the night in winter in Wisconsin, and I had on just a T-shirt. I slept in an oversized T-shirt. They dropped me barefoot in the pig pen, out back behind the
no.
in the pig pen. And I remember them. They just spit me out with that blue light like they do. They just drop you to the ground, and I remember when I hit the ground, it was so cold and hard, and I looked up, and I was like, wait, and then they went up slow, and then they just zoom, were gone.
Oh.
And I was so furious. I was so mad, and I couldn't see because I'd been inside the ship, which was really, really bright, and then now I was out in the dark, and all I could do was just stand there frozen, trying to figure out where I was. All I knew was I was outside, and I just started to feel my way around, and I felt the tubular fencing, that enclosed the pig pen, and I just started moving, trying to find my way out until I finally got acclimated to the dark, and then I saw the lights of the house, which there was just like the light down in the entryway that they left on all night in my girlfriend's house. And I had to walk across on the frozen gravel and snow, and I was so mad. And I asked them later, why did you do that? And he said, and I asked him a lot of things, why they did certain things, and he said, those are, what did he call them? He called them, he called them benchmarks. He said, those are benchmarks in your memory. He said, for when you awakened to your experiences and it was time for you to start talking about them, you would have these benchmarks that we let you have conscious awareness. We wanted you to remember, these times when we dropped you off or times when we picked you up. Because that's what I had random memories of those events. And they said that's to help make it more real. Because Da told me, he said, we don't have anyone who talks themselves out of the experience easier or faster than you do. He said, we'll come in and we'll have a meeting with you. Yeah, he said, we'll have a conscious meeting. It'll be a great meeting. We'll talk. We'll take you up on the ship and have a good time. He said, we'll drop you off. And he said, you wake up the next morning and you'll go, oh, that's not real. That was just a dream. He said, you do that more than anybody else. And he said, you're always looking for proof. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, sometimes when you ask for it, though, they deliver it to you in spades.
I know.
One night, I knew something was happening because when they were picking me out, first of all, I was going through infertility stuff because I was trying to get pregnant by my second husband. And so I was producing, 4, 5, 6 eggs a month because of the fertility drugs. So they were taking me, and then I started. I always have to go to the bathroom at night, so I would kind of like jump into the bed. They didn't want them grabbing my feet. It was like, so I said, okay. So they're coming back, and it would be marked clearly on my chart when I was ovulating. So I would have those kind of. I always argued with them. I remember waking up going, I'm fighting. And sometimes, I'm glad you mentioned the bright lights. Sometimes the lights, they must have had them in my eyes. Sometimes I would wake up with like an eye infection. And my eyes were almost glued closed because I had been, I guess, overexposed to those lights. And I'd say, oh, don't do that to me. I've got to go to work. And I have to dress up and working in an office, look nice. And I look like somebody, beat me up with a Mack truck or something.
Yeah.
But the one night I said, okay, if you're real, I want proof. God damn it, I want proof. And I woke up with 2 long, very long and deep V-shaped marks going from my right buttocks up to my left shoulder. And I didn't really feel it, but I was getting dressed and I had my back to my husband putting on my pantyhose. He said, what in the world happened to you? Now, he was totally Republican, conservative, agnostic, didn't have any belief. And so, like you said, they deliver these benchmarks.
Yes.
So you can't explain them away fast enough.
Right.
I like how you say that, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow. So we have about 8, 9, maybe 10 minutes left. what would you like to focus on? What would you like our listeners to know about you and your work?
And what is the promise?
Oh, yeah, what was the promise?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, people ask that. The name of the book is The Forgotten Promise. That's a good question. Thank you, because I was trying to grab what I could talk about here. The book was originally, as my guides brought it through me, they called it The 3 Important Things to Know, because in the book are the 3 things that they taught me from the time I was a little child, and that's the meat of the book. And so they wanted that to be the focus, the 3 important things to know. Well, Dolores Cannon didn't like that title, and I wasn't that crazy about it either. And she said, we have to come up with a different title. And I said, okay. And she said, I will. And I said, okay. So the book was going to be published, and I am estranged from my oldest daughter. I have not seen or heard from her in 6 years. And my youngest daughter, I have 2 daughters. My youngest daughter found out about the book, and she told me that she also was going to kick me out of her life if I let that book be published, because we had an agreement in our family that we were never going to talk about these strange happenings. You know, we all knew about it. My kids grew up with this stuff happening. So, but we always were sworn to secrecy. We all said, you know, we said, here's the deal that we had, is we would never lie about it. If anybody asked us point blank what was happening or did we have these experiences, we would never lie about them, but we would never volunteer or say too much. We would just sidestep the question. So that's how the agreement we had. So the fact that I wrote this book shocked her, and it shocked me. And I fought too. And when the book was done, I said, well, that's, I'm going to put that on a shelf. That'll be interesting for my great grandkids to read someday when they have open contact. And they said, no, you're publishing it. And I said, no, I'm not. And it'll ruin my life. And they said, it's going to be published. And I refused. And they called in Archangel Gabriel, who I didn't even believe in archangels, but Archangel Gabriel paid a visit and said, you will have the book published. It's your destiny. You're an ambassador to the galactics. And I said, okay, because you don't say no to a archangel. So I did agree to it, but my daughter was she told me she wouldn't talk to me anymore. So the day she told me that was Mother's Day back in 2012, and the book was just going to press, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her from my life too. And so I told Jim that night, I said, I'm going to call Dolores tomorrow morning, and I'm going to tell her she can't publish the book. And he said, are you sure? He said, are you sure? He said, isn't this like your life mission? He said, are you sure you can just do that? And I said, I don't care what it is. I said, I'm not losing both of my daughters. I said, I can't bear the thought of it. And I said, so I'm not going to allow it. And I said, I'm going to sleep on it. But I said, I'm 99% sure that's what I'm going to do. And he said, well, I'm going to leave you tonight to think on it and to pray on it. And so he left and he went home, which was interesting because I was alone. And of course, what happens at 2 a.m., which is his favorite time to show up, Da shows up. And he comes in and he makes a minor spectacle of himself. There's this big clap of thunder and a lightning strike kind of a thing. And woof, and here he is in my sitting room, right where I'm sitting right now. And he just materializes in here. And my dog goes crazy. We're both asleep, and my dog starts barking. And he says, what is this about not publishing the book? And I said, I'm not going to. I said, I'm not going to do it. And he said, have you forgotten the vow you took? And I said, and then he said, have you forgotten the vow you took? He said, have you forgotten the promise you made? He said, you took a vow. That's it. Have you forgotten the promise you made? You took a vow. And I said, I don't care. I said, you ask too much. I said, you ask too much. And he said, what is it that is concerning you? And I said, she's going to cut me out of her life. And I said, I can't bear it. And he said, and then he went on, he showed me some things. He showed me the reason why my oldest daughter is out of my life. He showed me that back in 1990 and 91, my mission here was actually done, and I was supposed to leave. At least that was an option that I had, and I had the option of leaving at that time, and they wanted me to leave, and he took me back, and I remember there was this meeting in my living room back then that we had, where they came, and I remember having that meeting, but I didn't put it in the book. And I remember part of the meeting was about them convincing me to allow myself to leave. I was supposed to die in a car accident, and I was supposed to come back and work on that side, because they said the planet is going to get, very chaotic, and it's going to be very painful, and it's part of your progression. It's part of your deal with your children, and that's how it was. That was one of the options, and that was the better way to go, because my death was going to have an impact on my children for the positive. Even though it would be painful, it was going to be positive, but I couldn't bear to leave them at that time, and I refused to leave. But the fact that I didn't leave, now it came back. I was now on I got reassigned, had a new mission, write the book. That was my promise that I made to do that. But as a result of that, my children had to have a break from me. They both needed to, because I didn't opt to leave, they had to have this experience of having this break with me, emotional break.
Yeah.
And it was interesting.
Individuate, yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting what he showed me. And he said it had to happen one way or the other, either through your death or through this estrangement. And I was like, oh, but it's so painful. And he said, yes, it is. And I said, oh gosh. So so I agreed to go ahead and write the book. And he said, you can't acquiesce to her demands. He said, she won't respect you. He said, that's going to play out. He said, this is the timeline. He said, look what happens if you do that. And he showed me. She doesn't, he said, you continue, you have the book published. She respects you. She eventually comes around. He said, your children are both fine. They're experiencing and growing and learning exactly what they need to. But my youngest daughter was supposed to be, my oldest daughter was actually supposed to be doing what I'm doing now. This was her role, to be the spokesperson and do this. But she got hijacked a long time ago, and it all played out different than what was originally. There's different paths you can take, as you know. So this timeline
What are the
played out.
three things to know? We're almost out of time. 3 things to know.
3 important things to know. Number 1 is most important thing to know, that they started teaching me this from the time I was a wee child, is we are all one with our Creator. We are all one with our Creator. And number 2, most important thing is we are multidimensional beings existing on more than one level simultaneously. And the 3rd most important thing to know is monitor your thoughts. And all 3 of those things are relating to the ascension taking place right now, and they went over those and over those and over those things, and they would teach me those things from a different perspective. So they became.
What do they mean by monitor your thoughts?
Yeah, what's moderate?
Monitor your thoughts.
Yeah.
Monitor your thoughts. Because they taught me that it creates our reality, and so you have to be careful of your thoughts and not allow them to get too negative. I had firsthand experience of that when I was in my 30s, and I started to have depression runs in my family. All my siblings and my mother suffer from depression. And I was going to go down that same path, it appeared, because I became very depressed when I was in my 30s, and they came in and they leaned real heavy on that teaching, and they said, we taught you, monitor your thoughts. Whenever you have a negative thought, replace it with a positive one. Even if you don't believe the positive thought, you're still changing the frequency around yourself, around your life, because you have to keep your thoughts high, because we're continually choosing what timeline, what frequency we're accessing, because there's multiple, that ties into the, to the multiple dimensional thing. So every thought that you have should be as high a thought as you can possibly have it, so that you're accessing a higher timeline. So you want to monitor your thoughts and keep them high.
And we're almost out of time. What's your website? How do people read it?
The Forgotten Promise.net.
Very well. Sorry. Thank you for joining us. I never thought what she said.
Thank you.
I look forward to meeting you next weekend.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Aloha.